Time being 6 o'clock, I'd like to call the Board of Health meeting to order. All members are present, as well as our Director of Public Health, Marty Golightly. Would everyone please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'm going to move on to public announcements. I'm going to turn things over to our Director of Public Health, Marty Golightly.
All right, good evening, everyone. First thing, we have the vaccination clinic schedule. So right now, we are giving vaccines in-house here in the Maya room for our patients ages 5 to 11, Monday through Thursday of this week from 2 to 4. So that's the 5th, that was today, through the 18th from 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And then next week, we're going to do it Monday and Tuesday, same time, same place. The appointments are hyperlinked on our Facebook page. They went out over Constant Contact, so if anybody didn't see that and they want one of those appointments, please let us know and we will send you the schedule. The 30th of November and the 1st of December are going to be the follow-up to our events at the Abington Middle School and the Woodsdale Elementary School. So you should have received a text or an email to make your second appointment. If somebody hasn't, please let them know, let us know, and we will make that, we'll make it happen. And if you can't make it to one of those days, let us know there is some flexibility with those appointments, or if you know somebody who wants a first shot on one of those days, let us know and we'll make it happen. We are also doing boosters for the Moderna. We're doing those Tuesday through Wednesday and Monday, shots dependent on our delivery of more boosters. And we haven't had a problem. We ordered more today of the COVID 5 to 11 and the Moderna COVID booster. Tuesday to Wednesday, the link is on the website. It's also on our Facebook, and we put that out on Constant Contact too. If access is a problem, internet access or aptitude, they have issues with accessibility, they can call us and we will make the appointment for them or walk them through it or a combination of all of the above. If communication is an issue, come in, we'll sort it out. And that's really all I have for the schedule as of right now. Yes, sir.
Now, just to be clear too, that you can get any one of the boosters. It doesn't matter. If you had Pfizer, you don't have to have a Pfizer booster.
No. So what we have for boosters right now is Moderna. And the Moderna booster can be given to anyone who had any of the other 3 approved shots. So if you got the J&J, you are welcome to come get here to get a Moderna booster. Same for Pfizer or the Moderna. You can come get any of these shots can get the COVID booster for Moderna, which is what we have right now. If we meet someone who is adamant on getting, I had Pfizer, I want Pfizer, I can make that happen. It's just easy for us right now logistically to do Moderna because our cold storage is still at Bridgewater State, so it can be a little bit cumbersome. But we do have the ability, if it's something that somebody really wants, we'll make that happen too. But yes, to answer that question. Any other questions about the schedules? Or desires or anything? For the announcements, so I'm happy to report today we had our SMRP grant funding. Our amount was announced today, and we had to sign the contract. This year we got $14,300, which is $5,300 more than we got last year. I believe that's a testament to our increased and focus on recycling programs at the compost site and Abington's growth. We have a lot more single-family homes, and the more single-family homes we have, the more points we qualify for that grant. And that's good because that pays for all of our household hazardous waste disposal, pays for our electronic waste disposal, and allows us to make it easier for our amazing volunteers at the compost site. Pays for a lot of stuff. Also, we are working with the so we have a neighboring town. So they're doing this thing called the Public Health Excellence Grant. What it is going to be for shared services. We are currently partnered with Brockton, Avon, Stoughton, and Whitman. This is a very exciting opportunity to get a lot of money for public health support for those communities. I talked to Scott today. We will set up a meeting for all of us during the official process to go through that, to kind of explain the what it is a bit more. But it is, just as I said, a shared services. So hopefully we can get a specific epi, we can get a social worker. At least that's my dream. Those are the things that I want. Another community health and education worker, those specialists with those specialized functions that can do a lot more of the education aspects, and some inspection. There's a municipal lead, hiring a grant administrator. We'll explain all of that. But the final walkthrough from the state was today, and it opens soon. So we're working with our MAHB legal counsel to get those 5 communities in. And I think that's really all I have for announcements. You guys all saw my cases email. If you have any specific questions about any of the stuff or statuses or anything like that, shoot me an email, give me a call. We can go over anything you want. That's all I got.
Thank you, Marty. Any questions from the board for Marty?
I'm hoping to pull up the email right now, but your email on cases, I'm just wondering percentages of asymptomatic to symptomatic, vaxxed to unvaxxed.
Yeah,
Do you have
so
any of that information?
we have 40 active cases right now. From 0 to 18, that made up 6 of our cases. 27 of our cases came from the ages of 19 to 64. And 7 cases came from 65 and older. Of the 6, 0 to 18, all 6 of them were eligible for vaccination, and none of them were vaccinated. The 27 cases eligible for vaccination, only 10 were vaccinated, and all 27 for the ages 19 to 64. And of the 7 cases for the 65 plus, obviously all of them were eligible, and 5 were vaccinated. No case under the age of 29 was vaccinated. As far as symptomatic, asymptomatic, that's case dependent, and it doesn't really function for us as to what they do unless they are vaccinated. But if they're positive, they isolate for 10 days.
Right, I understand that part.
That answer your question?
That was my question.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is a regulation review on our combined tobacco regulations. This time, I'd like to invite DJ Wilson to join us. He's the Tobacco Control Director of the Mass Municipal Association.
Thank you. Good seeing you all. I don't know if you were able to get my handouts forwarded to all of you.
We have several.
Okay,
We can
great.
specify.
We do have that.
Okay,
The model regulation, I
I'll
believe,
start with
the checklist.
ETS, or secondhand smoke regulation. This is the simpler of the two to talk about. And so all the action, and you'll see on the, all the action takes place on page 3 in section 4. And so what it basically says is that, you know, we enforce the state smoke-free workplace law, which has been in effect since 2004. And that state law is anti-preemptive, which means cities and towns can be stricter. And so these are the options to have if you want to be stricter in 4C. And then 4D is also included because it was something that happened locally before the state did, which was to expand the smoking prohibition to vaping as well. And so that's why that's in there. And then 4E, is if you wanted to ban smoking bars. Smoking bars are allowed under the 2004 state law. A smoking bar would be an entity goes before the Department of Revenue, presents a business plan and says a majority, which is at least 51% of our sales, is from vaping or tobacco use. And that will allow them, I'm going to take this off actually, and that will allow them to allow smoking and vaping inside. We only have 25 statewide because it's a tough, that benchmark is a tall order to make. They have to testify, they have to attest quarterly to Department of Revenue that at least 51% of their sales comes from tobacco sales. However, a lot of cities and towns, I think it is over 100, have decided that, this is one area that we just don't want in town for a couple reasons. And one is that it breaks that complete across the board smoke-free prohibition for restaurants and bars by having one place in town that allows it. And number two, and this has actually been the more popular one, is that if they're in multi-use buildings and the other users all complain, whether or not they're residential or they're other businesses. So we've had, smoking bars shut down in Springfield where there were condos on top. In Wakefield, they were one of the early ones to ban smoking bars because they were in a strip mall next to a rare coin store, and the smoking just kept, they just couldn't contain it. So that's the other reason to do it. So,
DJ, can I interrupt you for a question?
Sure.
In regard to that, if there was a smoking bar, they would have to get a business license through the town, who could, in theory, deny the business license because it was in a condo complex?
they could, you'd have to,
Okay.
yeah, you'd have to make that case, yes.
Okay.
So typically what happens with smoking bars is that they go on the website, download the application, send in a non-refundable fee, and then the next step is Department of Revenue calls the office here and says, do you have a smoking bar prohibition? If you say yes, then they get back to them and say, sorry, we're keeping your money. And if you say no, then they can go forward with the application.
Thank you, sir.
So this is obviously pretty simple and easy to hand out. So there was a question as to whether or not to combine the two or not. And so we most often see the two separate ones, and it's because if you had a problem with someone smoking in a prohibited place, an entity that was allowing that, this is a much easier 5-page document to hand to them to read than handing them, in addition, the sales regulation, which is pretty complicated. But we do have cities and towns that do put them together, and it's not unheard of. So if the Board of Health did want it all in one document, it's certainly something we can do. The sales regulation is the much more complicated one. And so just a little background on that. In 2018, there was a pretty sizable state law that was passed that amended a lot of the tobacco laws that raised the age to 21, that included vaping in the prohibition, that made it impossible for pharmacies to sell both vaping and tobacco products. And we thought that was a big win for us. And then in 2019, the very, very unlikely thing happened was that the legislature decided to take up tobacco 2 years in a row, which is really unheard of. The 2019 law was actually was stronger and broader, and it included a lot of moving parts. So one of the moving parts, and so what we did in this, to jump around, mine is not fully, I don't have a color printer at home, but if you have the color in your document, you'll see that there's yellow and there's green. Do you?
No, but we
No?
can kind of
Okay.
tell there's a darker highlight
Okay.
and a lighter highlight.
So what the yellow does, it kind of puts into this document all the new state law changes that were made. And so really, they are not something that is necessarily debatable. There's nothing that you can do. You can make it, like I said before, you can make it stronger, but you can't make it weaker. And so some of those changes are that they banned the sale of flavored tobacco and vape products anywhere but in those DOR-approved smoking bars. And even for those smoking bars, those flavored products can only be used on the premises. They can't be taken away. It also said that stronger level vapes, 35 milligrams per milliliter, is the threshold, can be sold in adult-only retail tobacco stores and smoking bars, but not in regular retailers. So those are the two big ones. The third very large one is that the sales to minors, and actually it's all laid out on page, it's near the end, I don't have them numbered. It looks like there's a chart nearing the bottom.
Which page was that?
It's near it's third sheet to last. But it'll look like this. It has this, it'll be actually a left-hand chart, right-hand chart.
I don't think I
I'm not sure we have that document.
Yeah, I don't think you
Can I
do.
see that, DJ?
It's about 4 pages from the back of the document. So
That one.
if you don't,
We don't have that document.
yeah, the one with this cover sheet.
Did you print it separately on your own? Or
I got
Or was it in your
mine
pile?
printed earlier from Chris, actually.
You all got it in email.
it's in the email?
All right.
I'll
Thank
share
you.
with
We have it
you.
electronically.
Hang on one second, I'll go make you some copies.
Okay, and I can continue blabbing about it. So what that chart does, it divides out those policies that, if violated, receive the mandated higher state fines, and those policies that are uniquely local policies and would go by your own your penalty structure. So the new penalty structure for state violated would be 1,000 first time around, 2,000 second time around, 5,000 third time around. That does include sales to minors and a violation of the flavor policy. So that really makes up about 98% of everything that gets violated in a typical compliance check or retailer visit. And so that's a big deal. So you'll see in the document that is divided between yellow, that state law mandated language, and green, which is that truly local policy decisions for the board to make. And so that's where we would concentrate our discussion tonight. I now need my thing in front of me, but but I can probably guesstimate what some of the things are. So there are updates to definitions in 2019. Finally, the state law decided to pay attention to our local regs and what they look like, and so they made the definition similar, except for some small changes. So we fixed that. One of the things that the 2018 law did was there was a long-term prohibition for cities and towns to do anything about plain rolling papers, and so cities and towns. There was a prohibition that you couldn't sell them to minors, but that was it. So in 2018, when they raised the minimum age to 21, they also raised it for rolling papers, and they also took away that preemption. So cities and towns can now do something about that preemption. I'm telling you this because it's something that you could consider to do, and you're going to ask, why would you bother? Because it's not so much that we care about the old easy widers from the 70s and 80s, so they were plain easy widers, but they now are flavored, and they're oftentimes made of other things. There's hemp ones, the CBD ones, and so what we have found, and the state law also found this, is that kids really are attracted to flavored products, and so if they can roll their own cigarettes or their own joints in flavored papers, they will far more than they will plain papers. So cities and towns could ban them completely, or include them in the flavor prohibition, that you couldn't sell flavor ones, and you could also limit that, because it's a purely local policy. You could also say, we'll still allow smoking bars and adult-only retail tobacco stores to sell them, but not plain regular retailers, general retailers. So that's something to contemplate. Just that is something new. The 2018, the state law never gave definition to them, so we provide in the draft a definition for it, and then we talk about those two options that you could have if you chose to do something about it. Okay, so when he comes back with this, so let's see what else I can talk about. Going back to the secondhand smoke, so what I would be doing is these notes that I made to myself. Secondhand smoke, typically the way it happens is that if you want to move forward with this, I would do up the drafts for you, and with whatever you want in it, understanding that you still would have a public hearing, and that public hearing is not a final decision. You could still make a decision to take stuff out if you chose to. So in the ETS regulation, you have language from the private club regulation. You have a standalone private club regulation. It would make sense to put it in the secondhand smoke regulation and then nullify that old regulation. I wouldn't change the language at all, just add it to the secondhand smoke regulation, so you don't have a third regulation. I would add whatever existing language you have from your 4C and put it in there, so it coordinates with what, it includes the existing language that you have already and voted on years ago.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And so let me go back to the sales now that we're back here. So blunt wraps, we have a new definition of blunt wraps. I can now not remember if you ban blunt wraps or not. You do, I don't believe you do. So that's something to contemplate. We have well over 100 cities and towns that have done so. And what blunt wraps are is a reconstituted sheet of tobacco. It is almost always flavored. And it can be sold for as little as under $1. There's no minimum price to it. And so we find this a lot, that kids really like it. And so that is something to contemplate. But there's the definition.
You mentioned on the
Yeah,
blood wraps.
I have it as a highlight, so I think we don't have it.
Yeah, we do.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Okay, so I can stop talking about it. Sorry.
DJ, you mentioned on the blunt wraps that those are restricted for sale. You can't sell those to minors currently, and that's state law?
Not blunt wrap, rolling papers. So
Okay, I don't think I know the difference, I'm sorry.
A blunt wrap is
Okay.
a rolling paper made out of tobacco.
Thank you, sir.
A rolling paper has no tobacco content to it.
Okay, I'm
But
learning.
you already have that in place, so I don't need to speak about it.
Blunt wraps were not allowed for sale as of 2017.
So one new definition under the definition section, which is C, tobacco product flavor enhancer. And the new state law has a section in it that also, they were very proactive in figuring this out, is that if you decided that you could only sell plain or tobacco flavored vape or conventional tobacco products, that it would be a small leap for companies to figure out how to have a separate product that would sit next to it that you then add to make your own flavoring. And so we have heard that in Great Britain there's a card that you can buy it's mentholated. You put the card in a pack of Marlboros, and an hour later it's a pack of menthol cigarettes. We've heard that vape products are sold plain with little vials of flavor next to it. The new state law actually tries to capture that and says if the intention is to enhance a plain or tobacco flavored vape or tobacco product, then it is prohibited as well. So that is something that we recommend adding because it's part of the state law. One broad reason for also including all these new definitions in this new state law is that we recognize that the state law has gotten more complicated than it ever has been before. But we want you to be able to hand a single document to your retailers and say, this represents everything you need to know. You don't need to go to the state law books to look it up. You don't need to do all those things. And they're never going to anyways. But it's all right there in one place. And so that's why we're trying to recognize that. You might be like, well, if it's in the state law, why put it here? But it's so they understand that it's right in front of them. So, so you're handing this, it's called in law, the four corners of the document. So you're handing them a document that they need to know what's in the four corners of it. So I'm just pointing out big changes to what we are doing. One thing you don't have would be on E10. And that is to cap the number of permits. Oh, you actually do have a cap. Do you have a cap?
Yeah, 29.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I drafted two other regulations today for two other towns, so I'm confused. So you have a basic cap that says when we hit 29, we'll have a waiting list for anybody who wants to wait. And if one of those existing permits turns in, they get one of the 29.
Marty,
So a couple things just to,
how many permits do we currently have out there in Abington? Do we have all 29?
Last time I checked, I believe we do have all 29. We'll do 28. I think it's 28. I have to get back to you on exactly.
Thank you, sir. I won't hold you to it.
I know there's one, pretty sure it's 28.
I was just kind of curious if we were maxed out or if we were low use.
We had,
We're close to
2020
the
wasn't
max.
very kind to a few businesses, so I
Right.
think it's 28. I'll check.
No need to check. I think I just was
you
curious
just
to hear
wanted
the
to know.
pulse. Yes, sir.
So, now's the time to think to yourself, do you want to lower that number? Just to think about, as an aspirational goal. If you did put it below the number that you have issued out right now, then the waiting list would be a long wait, because they'd have to wait until a couple get turned in to do so. So that's just one thing to think about. Typically, what we put in, also in the capping section, and you can read on your own, the variations. B, C, and D are all variations. B and C are variations on, are stricter versions of the cap. D actually is a separate restriction, and it says no new retailers within 500 feet of a school. And the next section, E, says no new retailers within 500 feet of an existing retailer, a tobacco retailer. A lot of cities and towns have adopted the one about schools, and we only have a handful that have done the no retailers near retailers. The argument for both is, well, the school is pretty clear. We only limit it to new retailers because if you have an existing retailer there that tries to sell their business and they can't pledge to their successor that they can grab their permit, like we have down in that F subsection, that the cost, the value of the business goes way down. And we recognize that. And, these caps, the capping and limiting permits is not supposed to be something that goes off a cliff. It's supposed to be very gradual. It's not supposed to be a deep dive. And so that's the reason for the school one. And then the same thing is true with the retailer near retailer, is that it's only new applicants. And the idea is that if you put too many retailers in one place, and they vie on price and gimmicks to get people in to buy their tobacco and vape products. All these have that F. We'd like to keep that F in, and that does say, I sell Mark my store, Mark can grab my permit regardless of what the cap is, so it stays the same. But if I decide to retire to Florida and turn in my permit, then there is one of these options is that it would lower automatically down to about 1. H, subsection H really talks to the state law. This is pretty much what it is. Except for in those highlighted, we do, so the state law says no person shall sell or distribute. We have added possess, hold, or keep because our funded programs have started doing inspections and compliance checks again. And what they're finding is that stores will have like a case of Marlboro menthol in the store and say it's my personal use. And so we're trying to get around that loophole and say that they can't keep it in the store if they can't keep prohibited flavored products within their store. That's why that's there.
What is that called? The product that they sell that you combine with your cigarettes to make them?
An enhancer.
An enhancer?
It's a shorthand term. It has like a 5, the state law is a 5-word.
Tobacco product flavor enhancer.
Yeah, I can never, we just call it
I'm learning
shorthand.
all sorts of new things today.
Yeah, the
Thank you.
enhancer kind of the shorthand to it. So I don't know in your existing regulation that you have, is this the existing one?
This one, for sale.
If you have educational institutions?
Yeah,
Okay,
but it just says educational institutions won't sell it.
okay, very good. So going on to to talk about the violation section. So the violation section we've made super cumbersome because the state law has made it cumbersome for us. So what this is, we're calling this a dual penalty section where it lists out what you have for your uniquely local policies and then what and then the ones that are subject to the higher state fines. And that's why that's, now as you can see, the chart that we have put in it. Now, if you go this route, the chart will update the chart, because that right-hand side, the uniquely local policies, you may not have them all, but we'll double check and see, and to make sure that it jives with the regulation. And we like that, so you can point out to the retailer what, if you sell flavors, see how it's on the left side, you'll get the higher fine. Now, so the section the subsection, which is S1, that talks about the state fines, it has 1,000, as I said, 1,000, 2,000, 5,000. It also has a 36-month tolling period. And then there are set suspension periods, which I believe the suspension periods match what you currently have. However, one thing that is different is that you have a 12-month tolling period on your local policies, and this is 36 months. 12 months is unusually low, and 36 months is a little higher than our average of 24 months. So you may want to decide which you choose to stick with. Most towns that have updated their regulations, I should say, because of COVID, we've not had a ton of towns update their regulations, have gone with the 36 months across the board. Now, we also have, just as an FYI, we do have a few towns that have said, we're going to do away with this dual and just say everything gets the higher state fines. The purely local policies and the other policies subject to the state law all get the higher fines and suspensions. So that is something to think about, but we're perfectly fine doing the dual penalties if that's the direction you want to go.
Sir, so one of the things I noticed about our Abington is that if you had 2 days in a row, they're fined currently as separate violations. For the purpose of just interpreting this, when we talk about having a case of a second violation, is it right to say that those are like second incidences, or is it like 2 days in a row?
You're going to advanced tobacco 201. So we have a written that you have to, when you go back on a separate day, you get a separate fine, right?
Right.
And so that's typical of all health enforcement.
Mm-hmm.
You find something awful in someone's kitchen, in a restaurant kitchen, you expect an inspection to happen within the next day, just to see what they're doing.
I would add, unless they have deliberately chosen to do it again.
Right.
Unless it's like
Oh.
a conscious decision to choose to do it again.
But
Correct.
like 2 days go by and we notify them on day 2, it might be 2 days of violation, but we wouldn't say, hey, you violated it twice, there's a $2,000 fine.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, yes, but so what he's getting to is that, you go into a restaurant, you probably have some kind of like ventilation thing that requires them to get someone in 5 days
They're
down
gonna
the
get a
road.
permit, it's a whole thing. We
But
wouldn't-
most of, our tobacco stuff is just, put the sign back up, don't sell, get rid of the put the flavored product in the back, and we'll be back in 3 days to
But
get.
if we come in on Tuesday and somebody's selling flavored vapes at a place, and we tell them to stop that, we do all of the appropriate, we come back Wednesday and they've chosen to keep selling flavored vapes,
Right.
we have the wherewithal to do, again, second violation.
That makes sense, and if the person wanted to protest that, they could come to the Board of Health like anyone at the violation.
Correct.
Okay.
Now, we do have a handful of towns that are looking into called stacking fines, which is walking in and saying, we've never been a program that walks in and stacks fines, because a lot of times you can walk in and just say, you're missing a sign, self-service display shouldn't be there, you've got flavors, so we boom, 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 catch them pretty quickly. And so our job is to get compliance, not to necessarily hand out fines as fast as we can. But we do have some towns that do say, if you, for example, the city of Beverly has right in their regulation, it says, if you sell to a minor a prohibited flavored product or a cigar under the minimum price, we will stack your fine and we'll give you 1,000, 2,000 right there. And so they do, but they're straightforward with it. So it's really just, it's a more of a enforcement, how you want to enforce it. We do recommend that all of a sudden, if the board said we're going to start stacking fines, that we do recommend you get out a quick letter or email to your retailers letting them know that you're going to do that.
So I have a hypothetical here. say we have a retailer that has some sort of violation and lost their license for temporary license, and then they continue to sell products, whether they're prohibited or not. Is that something the state would fall under the state fines or local fines? or-
It depends on what they violated to begin with. So if they violated, if they violated the flavors, it would be the state fine. The state law, the Department of Public Health, passed a companion regulation right after the state law. That regulation does address what the fine is for selling without a local permit. But most local, your local regs usually do too. I forget which one it is. But we do have in this document what gets incurred upon you if you sell without a permit. And obviously, if you have a repeat offender who just doesn't care and they're going to keep on selling, then that's a reason to bring them before the Board of Health. You always have this document does mention revocation, which is a permanent suspension is possible. But boards of health have always had the ability to suspend or revoke what you give out. And so, if you have really a bad actor, you can say, we need you before us because we're going to talk about all your Board of Health permits. And, if you're really causing trouble, we may extend this to talk to the town about other licenses or permits you have with other departments in the town. Usually by the time we get somebody who's that bad, they shut down themselves, or they end this. But we've had some some cities have gone toe to toe with some people who would just keep on violating no matter what. So just a couple things. Let me go back to your regulation, which I do believe I have right here.
The new combined copy, is that what you're referring to?
This is your existing regulation that you already have.
No, this is the new combined.
Yeah, that's the new regulation. You want
the sale?
You want the new sale, the existing sales, this one?
Yes.
Right here.
That's Marty's got it for you right there.
Thank you. Just a couple questions I have. I talked about the tolling period being 12. I think one of the issues that was coming up, under cigar sales regulation, you have the $2.50 is the minimum for a single cigar, and that's it. So this is an older version. If you look at the sample that I sent you, just give that a look over at some point. It does a few things. First of all, in your policy and in our ideal policy, you both have that the Board of Health will, time to time, look at the consumer price index and adjust it accordingly. No Board of Health has undertaken this, except for Boston did about a year ago. And so they have raised the price to $2.90 for a single cigar and $5.80 for a multi-pack. So, and you'll see our latest one basically says $2.90 for a single cigar and then $5.80 for any multi-pack, which would be 2 cigars or more. We typically don't see these small 2-packs anymore. It's just not worth it for the distributor and the retailer to have. Also, it's unusual that you have exempted adult-only retail stores, I should say. In fact, I think you're the only ones I've ever seen do that. So that's just something to keep in mind. Look at our new cigar sales regulation against yours and see if it's something that you may want to change. I forget, because it's been a while since you updated, right?
2017,
Oh, not that long. But it was before this.
but so much has happened since
It's
then.
the 2 state laws that really have changed everything. So I think that's about it. So, a couple of things. Look over our 2 sample regulations. Decide if you want to put them all together. It is possible to put it all together if you like. And then look to the green, which is really the decision for the Board of Health to make. There have been a couple instances we've had boards of health say, we just want to do the yellow. We just want to update to the yellow, and that's perfectly fine. And they even asked me, we usually recommend a public hearing, but we've even said to them, if you're just going to do the yellow part, like it's state law, there's no fight. But it is nice to put it all in the four corners of the document, so you don't have retailers standing there saying, I've never heard of this, when we just hand it to them and they know.
Okay. DJ, thank you.
Hopefully I didn't confuse
Yeah.
you too much.
Do you want to take any, I don't know if anyone has any questions. Would you be
Sure,
open to that?
I'll go right ahead.
Does anybody have any questions for DJ?
I do. And in addition to my questions, I'd like to invite public comment if we have, or questions for DJ, if you're comfortable with that.
Sure.
Since we do have people here today. Okay. I'm getting a no, but if someone changes their mind. So while I was looking at the state laws, I noticed there was a definition for little cigars. And they had these really technical, like, it has to be this size, they can't be sold unless in these packs. And one of the items I was considering is adding to our town the definition for little cigars and just copying it right from what the state has. And I just wanted to know, based on what you know, anything come to mind on your side to be wary of that, or reasons that we should not consider that?
And where would you want to add that?
Probably just to the definition section. There was
But
a,
where would it, what policy would it affect?
Sale?
Because tobacco products right
That's
now,
sale?
I think he's right, it would be sales. It did say it was limiting these to sales, I believe, of packs of 20, that you're not allowed to sell little cigars of a certain size.
so it would be the cigar minimum pricing.
Yes, sir, that's where I would
Okay,
probably
all
add
right.
it.
Yeah, okay.
I just wanted to know if that was something that made sense from what you know.
Yeah, it is very technical. It goes, and it gets worse when you add cigarettes to the batch, because cigarettes goes by weight per stick. And so it's very complicated what DOR figures out for their taxation purposes. And that's probably where if you found it, it's probably under taxation laws.
TIR 0897,
Yes,
sir,
state.
I don't know.
It's Department of Revenue. It's all,
I think
it's all
I
taxation.
kind of tend to agree with Christine, because it says on the first page of our existing restricting the sale of tobacco products, whereas cigars and cigarillos can be sold in a single dose and enjoy a relatively low tax as compared to cigarettes. We should probably add a definition for what a cigarillo is.
So, but what we do, if you go to the cigar definition in the sample regulation,
Yeah.
we try to get around that. We try to avoid that whole definition because we don't need to make those distinctions, right? And the state law does a good job on the flavor policy by avoiding those distinctions altogether as well. So in cigar, we don't talk about weight or size or anything. We just say a roll of tobacco that's a leaf. The leaf is tobacco with about a tip or a mouthpiece, and that can be used when you just take it out of the package. So we really are broad on what
Right.
we have cigar to be.
My thought process would be if we if our goal is to give this to businesses so they know how to be regulated, kind of doing them the service of saying, hey, FYI, Massachusetts considers little cigars this, be aware, that might be a good service because
Well, yeah, it's perfectly fine to say. We could add a phrase that says that this includes cigarillos and little cigars in the cigar definition. Would that
yes,
help?
sir. Yes, sir.
Okay.
I was just going to copy and paste for Massachusetts. I didn't have any problems with any of their
No,
sizes or
no.
weights or any of that. That was it as far as myself, as far as questions for DJ. Aaron,
Okay.
I don't want to hog.
No.
I have no questions.
DJ, thank you for being here. I just wanted, how many cities and towns have you worked with across the state?
Oh, most?
Most.
I mean, I've been doing this 26 years, so.
Yeah, I just wanted to highlight your experience and expertise. And can you also share with us the importance of this as to particularly the flavored tobacco and how these regulations affect our youth?
Yeah, so, prior to the 2019 state law, where the flavor policy was really city by city, town by town, we recognize, well, it was well recognized for a long time, and that's been added to the state law, that what draws kids to smoking and tobacco use and vapes and Juul is all flavor, right? So it all comes down to flavor. You take away the flavor, it just doesn't mean anything. And so that's even with just, menthol, is also a flavor, and that draws people. It soothes the throat. It makes it easy to have that first cigarette. It's just easy to do. And so we've known that all along, but it's just been very difficult to deal with this. So the feds jumped into this, years ago and recognized this as a problem, but they were timid, and so they just said they limited the flavors to banning flavors in cigarettes only, and they said except menthol, mint, and wintergreen. One of the reasons they did that was purely political, because at the time, I believe it was RJR, had come out with a handful of different flavors like Caribbean Mist and things like that for cigarettes, and the other competitor, which would have been Philip Morris, was nervous that they'll have to come out with flavored cigarettes, so they jumped on this and had the federal government do that. So that took us back to cigarettes just to being plain menthol, mint, or wintergreen. And so, but that, then the industry knew that this was a huge opening because you could have cigars, because cigars are different from cigarettes. So you could have this slew of flavored cigars. So then we saw this popping up in high schools all over the place. We saw 50 to 99-cent cigars in grape flavors that no adult cigar smoker would ever have put to their lips. They were coming out with, and so we. I mean, this is always a whack-a-mole. We just don't have the money or the expertise, that the industry has to figure out what the next steps are, and so we try. And so, we whack down this, no flavored cigar thing, and then they still like, okay, well, what's the next great thing that will attract kids to nicotine addiction? Vape. And so, but vape was clunky in the beginning, right? It was, first of all, the first ones are $100, and then they became disposable, so that was a win for them. There was still $10 for them, and it was this big long metal thing that was weird for kids to walk around. They tried to wrap it in, colors that kids would like, and it never hit. And then Juul hit, and it was a brilliant marketing design, and it used a different kind of nicotine uptake that was fast for kids. So they came out with flavors. It looked cool, and they say one hit, boom, and they could do this in the back of a classroom, right? Have it under the sleeves, boom, and be done with it. We've all seen adults, use a quick hit of vape where they're not supposed to. And so, so all along, the common thread to all this, going from cigarettes to cigars to vape to Juul, all along it's been flavors. And so, the golden fight at the end was always with menthol, because they knew that they needed one flavor that had to be around forever, and so that was, we're the first state to do this as a state for menthol. And the state really, the legislature generally doesn't jump ahead of themselves too far, but we had like 15 cities and towns expand their tobacco flavor policy locally to include menthol and take it out of the exempted pile, and so there were a bunch of lawsuits that were in the middle of happening when the state propelled forward, and oddly enough, COVID helped us, as well did that national incidence of EVALI, which is the nickname for kids that were vaping and having serious bronchial issues. So the governor shut down all the vape stores, and so then he's like, okay, well, eventually they had to reopen, but we have to figure out a way to have them open up safely, and that's what really led to them going back and for the second year in a row dealing with tobacco policy, and this time flavors. So it was a big deal, and it really helped us out because we were now getting such coverage across the state with the local policies that we were starting to see places where, we were getting reports prior to COVID, because COVID really screwed up all of our surveillance as to what kids are doing, because they're not in school, they weren't in school. But kids were really hopping town to town to find the place that still sold flavors. So this is not a big surprise, right? Kids figure out the one liquor store in town that won't card them, and kids were finding out the one town that they could, a quick ride to, bike, car, walk, that they could get to pretty quickly, and they knew that, that town didn't have anything in place. And so it was great that the state took this, took this big leap forward. And so far it's been, enforcing has been somewhat of a challenge, but the challenge was compounded by definitely COVID. The official date for the whole flavor policy to go into place was June 1st, 2020, where we were all sitting at home, never leaving our houses again. So that was a big difficulty for us. So we hope to see it makes a difference. It's hard to get data. It's hard to get public health data anyways, even the best of times. But we're just now getting back into schools and figuring out what kids are doing. We're unclear what they're doing sitting at home. We don't know. They could have switched to conventional products. They could have quit. We just don't know yet. We're just trying to figure that out. But the flavor thing was, no kid would care less about an unflavored Jewel. Just would not happen.
Thank you.
What percentage of adults are smokers, like in Massachusetts?
I think it's about 11 or 12% statewide. And then, there was a steady, the usage of cigarettes has always steadily gone down. But vape drew that up. So if you are asking, do we see fewer? Yes, we have the fewest percentage of kids using cigarettes today than ever. But if you say, well, what's the rate of nicotine addiction? We'll be like, well, not far off from where we started because of vape from our last data from 2019. Yeah. So it is always, but like it is always this battle, right? And then we're next going to see IQOS, which is this Philip Morris invention that has a tablet of tobacco in it. It's heated, not burned, but it's covered because it has tobacco, and we cover tobacco in our broad tobacco product definition. And we continue the fight in DC with FDA approving some e-cigarette brands, but it doesn't matter if they've allowed 3 for RJ Reynolds that are menthol, but doesn't matter to us. It will still limit their sales to smoking bars.
Was there an uptick in traditional cigarette sales after this flavored ban went into effect?
No,
particularly from adults?
No. So DOR maintains that data, but they don't break it down by menthol or not. Is that true? Am I right? It went down in Massachusetts, but it did go up a little bit in 4 other, 4 of the budding states for us, but it did go down in New Hampshire, but some of that, New Hampshire has sold more to Massachusetts people when this first went into effect, but that's slowly abating. Again, we were unable to get people out there in person to convince menthol smokers to quit because we were all sitting at home and we were all eating more and smokers were smoking more. So it really threw off our campaign, and it also threw off the data. Yeah.
I think this question's for Aaron. What is the best way to move forward from here?
I think what I would like to do at this point in time, like to entertain, is us to just decide whether or not we want to ask DJ to draft something up for us, and then come to our next meeting and just figure out exactly what sections we want to attack, and then from there figure out if we need a public hearing or not.
I think Marty had something to say.
Yeah.
Your recommendation is to avoid, if possible, a combined regulation and stick with.
Yeah, but
What have you seen be more successful, combined or separate?
separate's just easier because it's just because then you're just handing something. It doesn't happen that often, but you're now and then going to get like what's notorious around the state is like the single law firm that has one lawyer, paralegal, and a secretary, and the lawyer's smoking at his desk. But rather than give him all that, this, just give him,
Just the yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Aaron, I'm concerned about voting on this en masse. There's a lot of information here. So I do like what DJ's put together with the checklist for policy decisions.
Yeah, so I want to just be clear, I don't want to vote on anything tonight.
Okay.
And I would prefer that the board didn't do that, although if there is a motion made, we will act on it as necessary. I think we really should just decide on whether or not we want to have those drafted up and then come back next week and start talking about exactly how we want to approach the regulations.
I think the
that we have
question on the,
drafted.
excuse me, I think the
Yeah.
question on the table is what we want DJ to add into the draft language, though. So I was
Well,
just
would-
curious if we wanted to make motions for which items we do want in there to be drafted, and then the vote would come after.
I mean, I would agree with Christina that I am a little concerned about trying to make that motion in mass, maybe right at this point in time. I don't know if, based on what we have, if there's an option of drafting up based on what we have already with those particular.
I would get, I
Yeah.
do think it makes sense to just sit back and give it a look, talk about it, and then at the next meeting, you can clearly, decide what green items in the sales sample that you're interested in doing or have questions about. And then in the secondhand smoke, just go to that section 4, and you'll see the options that you could include or not.
Okay.
And just recognize that I would want to move the private club stuff to that.
Thank
So maybe that's.
It is a lot.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with DJ and say that we can, basically, let's just move on from this for tonight. Let's synthesize what we just took in, and next week, our next meeting, we can approach those green sections and decide how we want to tackle it.
Eric, can I do one thing?
Yeah.
I can have them updated, both things updated, both the sale and the workplace smoking, and send them to DJ for review, if that's okay with you. And then send them to the board after, so you have a long time to look at them before the next meeting.
Yeah,
Okay?
Are you saying that taking the samples and then applying them to what we have already?
Yes.
And then, okay.
So
And then
they're
using that as our basis for our discussion?
Yes,
Okay.
using DJ's model regulations as templates to update our current existing regulations, asking DJ to review them for expertise, and then sending them to the board after that. Is that okay?
That's great.
Great.
Thank you.
Awesome. I don't think that needs a vote. I think we agree. That's fine.
And keeping them separate.
Okay. DJ, thank you for coming and talking with us. Really, really appreciate it. And we will certainly be in touch.
Sorry for it being a little confusing, but.
No, that was
Thank
really
you.
concise and very
Okay.
informative.
Doesn't help when the state does it 2 years in a row.
You have my email?
I do, sir.
Okay.
Okay. So moving on to our next agenda item, we are continuing to review our body art regulations. Christina asked for this to be on the agenda, so I'm going to turn this over to her for discussion.
Okay, so just to set the conversation, I myself am not going to put this body art regulations anything to a vote tonight. My purpose tonight is to inform on sections 1 or 2 recommendations I'm making, mostly because section 2 is the definitions. If we don't all agree on the definitions and we move forward with the full regulation, we'll probably create more work for ourselves. So what I want to do is I want to vocalize sections 1 and 2, suggestions I want to make. I do want to go through them verbally because I want there to be public awareness, since we have small businesses that will be affected by this. And because I'm going through a lot, I actually printed it all out as well. So I'll hand that to each person. I'm going to verbally go through each page. I'll pause at the end of a page to see if I skipped anything, not being clear. And then I'll move on to the next page, and at which point I'll say any questions. And then my goal is to say, okay, let's bring this back to next meeting, okay? Does that kind of make sense? Yeah. All right, I'm trying to make it digestible.
Christina, I did bring a few recommendations for this policy as well, so do you want me to just go after you go? Would that be okay?
That's a good
Is
question.
this to the regulation that you guys have already approved at the last meeting?
It is.
Okay.
I brought one for
So
yourself as well.
so then any changes will have to be voted on and,
Yeah, this
Okay.
is, I think we're just looking at suggestions at this point in time. Melissa, that'd be fine if you want to follow in succession.
Thank you.
That said, I'll pause at the end of each page, so if it's really relevant, Melissa, I'll accept you to jump in.
Thank you.
All right. So just the first page, just to kind of give the layout, left-hand column is the page that's on our actual regulation. I tried to put the section I'm referring to. The original content is word for word from the regulation, and then the suggested modification, my rationale is there. You may not agree with my rationale, and that's okay. That's what the meeting in 2 weeks is for, okay? So just to get this on the record for page 1, section 1, my recommendation is to remove the phrase body art is prevalent and popular throughout the Commonwealth. My rationale, its BOH authority is not based on prevalence, and if body art becomes unpopular, this doesn't change our authority or purpose.
I had the same comment in my notes. Thank you.
A+, we're off to a good start. The second item is on the word that I've never said aloud before, autoclaving. Okay, so this is a machine that's used for sterilization. I looked up different autoclaves, and I found that there's different machines that have different operating procedures. So my suggestion is to change this language to by use of an autoclave and the changes in accordance with the autoclave's operating procedures, for example, a minimum of 30 minutes at 20 pounds. The next part is on section 2, bloodborne pathogens. The only change is the regulation we're referencing has changed its title. So I'm suggesting we change our title to the new title, which is bloodborne pathogens. Next up is section 2, the definition of body art. This is just a clarity, suggesting we change it to practices that are defined as medical procedures instead of the word considered, or prohibited by the Massachusetts Board of Registration. And the reason I suggest that is each state has its own medical board of registration, and by putting the word Massachusetts, we're saying we're adhering to our own state board. Next up is the body art practitioner apprentice. I've changed the has not met the training requirement to has not fully met the training and experience requirements. This is to align with page 18 of the reg. The next item is the definition to body piercing. This part of the regulation is about the earlobe with a pre-sterilized single-use stud and clasp system manufactured exclusively for ear piercing. I've added the word in parentheses, i.e. piercing gun, stud gun, because that's the common vernacular, just to make it crystal clear what we're talking about. The next change is the word branding. This is a medical procedure. I'm sorry, I apologize. This is applying a heated material to your body to create a brand. Per the National Institute of Health, there is an article on freeze branding, a novel injurious mechanism for humans. So I've added the word cold to prevent cold and hot branding. And the final change for this page is we are referencing a CMR section that has just had a title update, and I'm just suggesting we use the new regulation title. Okay, I'll pause. Everyone asleep? I know, it's exciting.
Okay, so the model, I'm sorry, Christina, so the
Yes, sir?
model, so we use the model regulation for the state, just so, model regulations for body art establishments is where we get all of these terminologies from, and it still hasn't been updated to entitled bloodborne pathogens. Go for 2. It is still on the model as occupational exposure to bloodborne pathogens. It's also still on the model as saying not having defined as medical procedure or prohibited by Massachusetts Board of Registration of Medicine. It's still defined as that original content.
I looked it up, the actual thing that the state's referencing, I think they're out of date on the reg, because what they're referencing, when you look that up,
I
it's-
completely
yeah.
agree and understand, but I just want everybody to understand that what we took it from was the model. So if we're making changes, you're making changes to the model. So just,
Right.
not necessarily right or wrong, it's just the model says that. So that's where it came from.
Oh, yeah, everything I have, by the way, I found good reason for it the way it was. There was nothing in here that jumped out to me and I was like, what was someone thinking? This was all very granular little detail stuff. So whoever, there should be no shame at all about what we've had situated here. Continue on?
Yeah.
Okay. Next section, section 2, contaminated waste. We're just format consistency on the word semi-liquid. Next section on ear piecing. This is a big change. There is the statement, the definition. Ear piecing means the puncturing of the lobe of the ear with a pre-sterilized single-use stud in the class and ear piercing system following the manufacturer instruction. The rationale, I believe, for having this defined here is in Massachusetts, and correct me if I'm wrong, Marty, stud guns are only permitted for the ear lobe. Now, our regulation clarifies on page 6 in section 3B what you can do with lobes, and what you can do in 4C with other parts of the ear. But nowhere in our regulation do we ever use the term ear piercing. So because we don't use the term ear piercing, and because we're kind of clarifying what you can pierce with what where, I'm recommending we just remove this definition, because if you're a ear piercer reading this, and you hear this is what ear piercing is defined as, it can get you on the wrong foot. The next section is exposure. I rephrased this for clarity only. Myself, as a layman reading this, I had some trouble understanding. I just want it to be clear. And my clarity, I won't go through that because there's no content changes. The next section, guest body art practitioner. I recommend removing the word visiting because it's open for interpretation. I don't think it's necessary for enforcement. Next section is the hand sink. I'm recommending remove the word lavatory. It's technically not in a bathroom. The next piece, and by the way, please correct me, Marty, if I have this wrong. I think the phrase hand pieces actually is hand piecers, so it's just a word correction. Next section.
Honestly, I don't think so. I think
Oh.
it is hands pieces because that is things that you use as your, the instrument you're actually using for the, to move the tattoo.
It's called a hand piece.
I'm pretty sure.
Okay, we can strike that one
Which,
next
uh,
week. I'll double check. I'll
But
call a
let me
tattoo guy.
double check, 'cause we had some of our local establishment tattoo artists also help us with this.
Right.
So let me double check with our real subject matter experts in that.
I'll take their word over mine on that.
Same, dude.
The next one is about the phrase dense low porosity plastic. I added some clarity, some technical words of biocompatible polymers, which is plastic, and I gave examples of what's currently industry standard of acrylic, silicone, and medical grade. And then finally, for this page, I removed the definition for light colored because it doesn't appear anywhere else in the regulation. And I'll take a breath. Any questions?
I have an issue with page 6, 3B, that the single-use,
Page 6?
yep,
Oh, sir, I'm not there yet.
On-
I'm still on I'm still on the second page
Well-
of this.
in the regulation, page 6. You were just talking about it with ear piercing.
Yes, I'm not there yet, sir. I'm still on section 2.
On this. On
She's on,
page-
he's on,
Oh, you're on the ear piece.
page 3, section 2, ear piercing.
Which in the regulation.
Which in the regulation is
is
page
page 6, 3B.
Mm-hmm.
Talking about the stud guns,
Yes?
you can get, your ears can get just as infected
Mm-hmm.
using one of those as a regular piercing with a needle.
It is legal by Massachusetts law, so I think probably what you're bringing to light is not necessarily the definition, but whether we want to allow the use of stun guns in the town of Abington.
Okay, I don't know if this is correct to say. I would prefer to not have the exemption for those, to make those just as susceptible to all these rules as a traditional ear piercer would have to.
So I think the proper way to tackle Section 3 exemptions is, for tonight's purposes, I'm going through mostly the definitions, so we're talking about the same things. And I think when we get to the exemption part of it, that would probably be the best time to vote, to bring that up. It's not saying no, I'm just for the purpose of now trying to define what ear
I
piercing
understand.
is. So when we get to that section, we're all talking about the same thing. But I'm glad you brought that up, because I didn't think about that. And when I get to that section, now I will.
Actually, with Andrew bringing up that section there, we are talking about ear piercing. Is there a
Yes.
separate definition for exactly the action that is happening there, or,
There is not?
so would that mean that the ear piercing section recommended to be removed would be relevant there?
No, it would not, because Section 3 does not reference the word ear piercing as being something that's only permitted by the lobe. Section 3 is specific that piercing the lobe of the ear. So in Section 3, we are specifically talking about the lobe of the ear is eligible to be used by a stun gun, also known as a single-use stud and class ear piercing system, which the Department of Health was cool enough to actually give us the right technicality. While Section 4C goes into more detail about other parts of the ear that can be pierced. So my point for the change today is, since we don't use the word ear piercing anywhere in the regulation by itself as a definition, to say, hey, ear piercing's allowed or ear piercing's not allowed, that we don't include it as a definition here. Because otherwise, you could easily say, hey, listen, I see that in section 6, page 6, section 4C, it says right here that I'm allowed to pierce this part of the ear, and then in this section, you say ear piercing means single-use stud. Basically, my goal is if you're piercing the ear, you are really, really clear as a business practitioner if you're using the lobe, what you're allowed to do, and if you're using the other parts, what you're allowed to do. And that you're not looking at a definition on one page that's not used anywhere else in this regulation, and you're getting steered in the wrong path.
I have no further comments.
This would be a good one for us to bring up next week, and I would absolutely welcome if we want to do better definitions, because that's sort of the goal. But I'll move on to the next section, good? And if I'm not explaining this well enough, let me know. I don't mind, I try. So next section is on Master Practitioner. This one, the Health Department might have some way on. I'm suggesting we remove this phrase, and my reason is I found it to be Abington specific, and it's used to delineate who's allowed to train an apprentice. I'm recommending we remove it because as a town of Abington, I don't want us to have liability bestowing credentials like, well, this person is a master practitioner. Now, we do define the specific education training requirements in the regulation on who is allowed to train an apprentice. But since we do that, I'm just saying I don't think this term of master practitioner is relevant. Next art is mobile body art establishment. I just rephrased this for clarity. I personally had a hard time understanding what it was referring to, so I just reframed it. Next section on physician, I added the word Massachusetts Board of Registration of Medicine. Medical providers, physicians are not allowed to practice in states they're not licensed in. And the way I read this without the word Massachusetts, somebody from Connecticut could come over, their physician, and they can get right to work. And I believe it should be somebody licensed in the state of Massachusetts. Next section, I just did a quick format update from US with right punctuation, and then I changed the word sanitizer to disinfectant. That's just per the EPA's website. Next thing, I changed the word international biohazard symbol to Unicode biohazard symbol. It's semantics, it's not a big deal, but I wanted to put it in there. And then finally for this page, on the single-use items, I added the word or and crossed out on each client so it was crystal clear that if you are using a one-use item and there's not a person involved, like this is a one-time use sanitizing thing, you gotta throw it away. The way I read it before, it seemed like it's a one-time, one-person use, but there are certain parts of tattooing and body art that you only use when you're doing like cleaning, and those need to follow the same kind of technicalities, okay? End of that page. One more to go. We're going to get there. Finally, ultrasonic cleaning unit. I updated the unit approved by the board to U.S. Food and Drug Administration. That's who approves these units. But Department of Health, if you guys inspect these things, and fully welcome to say that's the Board of Health. I just, from what I could tell, I thought it was the FDA.
They are part of the establishment inspection requirements.
Okay.
They are. They're
So-
called, yeah.
So if you want to keep it to the board, I'm fine with that. I was just trying to make it kind of clear. And then finally on the universal precaution section. So this is where I had the hardest time doing research, and I do welcome better suggestions. I could not find the old thing, and when I go to the CDC, they say like it's archived and has been updated, and they kind of point you to new universal precautions. So I replaced the old one with the Guide to Infection Prevention for Outpatient Settings, complete guide and checklist, and included that. For our health department, if you're looking up the old one, the June 23rd, 1989, I found to be the wrong date. I think it's June 24th, 1988. And that was kind of something that I had a hard time locating it. And then finally, I just did a paragraph break for review, replaced semicolons with commas. So that's the end of the recommendations. It's a lot. I tried to make it digestible. I am not like favoring a vote on this today, but I do want to get it on the record what I'm bringing in 2 weeks. If we get through these sections, more than likely, I'll probably recommend we do a vote per page to allow ample time to argue, discuss, offer improvements, and then we can kind of go through there through the rest of regulation. So,
Before we do that, I do have an issue with the single-use items, the way you have it, could
Yes.
still be considered, could mess a couple of people up, because there are, like you said, parts of it, when you disinfect the area for a tattoo, before you shave the arm, you're gonna disinfect it. That's one single use.
Yes.
But there are also items, I think we need both, that is on each client as well. I think we need
Right.
both.
So I suggest you
Both
write down a
definitions.
suggestion and bring it in 2 weeks.
He's 100% correct. We can't, I think on each client cannot be struck from this.
Okay.
And I also think physician can't change because there's other states for, if someone had a license in another state, and they come with a physician's note that their hepatitis B titer, for example, was drawn on this day, we should have no issues accepting that.
I think that sounds like an unusual situation. I
And
think
it
we should
happens
probably,
quite often.
I think we should include that there, but the way it's written now is a little bit broad. You can be licensed in any state and come here and practice, and that is not how medical licensing works. It's very state-specific, so,
Medical licensing, yes, but
Correct.
medical procedures done in other states are still valid in Massachusetts.
that's not true.
If
I
I give
mean-
you a shot, if I give you a shot here, you still got the shot if you go to Connecticut.
Not all medical procedures are legal in every single state.
No, but
There's state-by-state guidelines.
for some things, yes. But
Yes.
things that are going to be very tattoo and body art specific are going to be transferable. For example, immunizations or titers or lab draws.
Right.
I mean, we could strike it, but just FYI.
That does make sense, but there are different state regulations, and I don't have the ability, nor do I think anybody on our current board or Department of Health, to monitor every single state when they update regulations.
No, but when we
And-
have a visitor who comes in with paperwork from a different state, I will have to send them to a Massachusetts physician if they want to have a visiting license.
We could add something in here if they have that situation. I think that would be appropriate, but I don't want to open it up to anybody with a visiting physician when we don't have the ability to manage what other states do and don't allow. That's too broad. That's my opinion. All right, any other discussion?
Page 4, master practitioner, you said you want to remove that whole definition to prevent liability. Is there, and you said there was a definition somewhere else for what in Abington, a definition for somebody, because not any tattoo artist could train somebody on how to tattoo.
Yes, I did say that, and the rationale was located in the section that it's referencing, I believe. If you give me a second, I will relocate that. So it's on section 11, and when we get to this section, I'd probably recommend, maybe it's not section 11. No, it's not section 11. Let's see. Somebody, perhaps Christine Pfeiffer, tabs her document. It's on page 19. This is the Body Art Practitioner Apprenticeship Program, and in section C, it talks about what makes a master practitioner. So my recommendation when we get to this part would be very much the same as today, that we remove this title of master practitioner, and we simplify, like, this is the type of licensed professional that's allowed to conduct apprentice training. What I don't want is somebody going to another town and saying, hey, I'm a master practitioner. Well, who said you were that? Oh, the Abington Board of Health. That's not a title that bestows anything out of the town of Abington. So that's kind of my theory. When you talk about apprenticeship and training programs, ideas like a master in an apprenticeship or an artisan kind of field, that means something. To say I'm a master woodworker means something outside of I'm just allowed to train. And I just want to be careful. I'd rather the tattoo industry bestow those types of language. And if we didn't have other artisan programs that use that term in like their normal course of business, I probably wouldn't even like blink at it. But I know that to be true, you know, a master oil painter. So.
I was
Not-
wondering if Marty could comment on that specifically, that it's the rationale comment is that it's Abington specific. Is that true?
I believe it was in the model, but I would have to check again, I'm sorry.
If it was at one time, Marty, I
don't
might
think-
not have access to the old
I don't
documents,
have
so,
access to the old document.
yeah, so I'm sure that's, I would not be shocked it was in an old regulation that got updated, and I just don't have access to the older one anymore.
I would just be very careful as to who we would allow to train a apprentice.
I agree, and I have.
I don't know if we need to change that to master practitioner to maybe experienced artist or something like that, but I think there definitely needs to be a delineation of who should be training and who should not be training.
Now that I 100% agree with. I'm just not at that section yet. I'm not saying get rid of that section in any way, shape, or form. I'm just talking about the idea of we have a definition that,
I don't know if that means we're bestowing that title upon the artist who is training. It was just as a way to reference the person training the apprentice.
yeah, I think maybe something more clearer, you know, because when I read this the first time, I said to myself, oh, okay, this is what I thought as a person reading it the first time. Okay, I get it. I'm an apprentice. I get my license, and then eventually I graduate to master tattoo artist. And then
I'm
when I
embarrassed to
started,
say this, that might actually be a tattoo industry, and I just don't know it.
I couldn't
I feel
find
like
it.
I should know it.
I'm sure it is. It makes sense. I just let them bestow master upon people.
Just as a,
Oh yes, I'm so sorry. Are we okay as the Board of Health if we open up to public comment?
well, that's my decision.
Oh, okay.
Chris, if you'd like to comment, that's fine.
Just in when,
To be fair, he's also helping me work on this from the department standpoint.
so on the last thing that the board voted on, what the guest practitioner, I did look at a number of other towns, and I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that the other 350 communities in Massachusetts refer to master practitioners. That's from the, so it's I won't wanna say universal, but I think statewide, it's considered a universal term.
I wasn't able to
I
find
honestly
it.
don't know. I mean, we can look it up. Maybe it is an industry standard that we just don't know about.
I
I think
did.
the easiest part is just to look it up and talk to our subject matter experts at the shops. And we have 3 great shops in town, and they're all 100% willing to be a part and help us out. So.
I welcome new research in other towns. I did look at other towns and communities in Massachusetts. I was not able to locate that type of phrasing in their body art regulations from their towns. But I welcome it because, of course, I'm one person, and many perspectives make this a robust process.
I definitely want to continue discussion on these suggestions. I would think, at least from my perspective, one thing I would be cautious of is striking definitions without understanding why they were put in the models in the first place, if there's a way to do such a
There
thing.
is 100% way to do so. What I can do is I can send a track changes document to our legal counsel, asking him to review that with our current, with the model, and then I will put the track changes in there as the things that we have stricken and or added, and welcome feedback from them, and then send it to the board.
If this makes it easy, and you want me to forward you an electronic copy of this, more than happy to as well.
Please do.
Okay. If I forget, remind me. You know where to reach me.
Melissa?
Thank you. The end of the first paragraph says practitioners must demonstrate knowledge and practice of universal precautions, sanitation, personal hygiene, sterilization, and aftercare requirements in order to prevent the transmission of disease or injury to the client and/or practitioner. But it doesn't go on to tell us how. Can you inform us on that, Marty?
Which page are you on? I'm sorry.
On the very first page, end of the first full paragraph.
On our current regulation?
How do they demonstrate that? Do they, is it just upon inspection of their business place?
Right. That is on their us going and performing our spot checks on the regulation enforcement.
Okay. My recommendation for that section is to also add must demonstrate knowledge of 105 CMR 480, which stipulates minimum requirements for and management of medical or biological waste.
I see what you're saying. So the definition for contaminated waste include that regulation in that section as well?
Yes.
Okay.
To the title paragraph. To the
The
purpose and authority
purpose and
paragraph?
Yeah,
Okay.
just added in. My next comment is on page 11, section G. For establishment record keeping, it only requires 3 years. I wanted to up that to 7 so that you had more time to be able to reflect back on historical data if needed.
Totally doable, but it would have to start from now.
Right.
So we go three
They'd be
years from
grandfathered
today,
in.
right,
Mhm.
and then we start after that, moving forward 7 years. We can't, I don't think we can't historically add something that they may have already purged, but,
So there'd have to be a note on that it is effective the date that this took place.
effective whatever date.
Yeah.
As a side comment to that, I believe the current HIPAA regulation is 7 years and 10 years for minors. So we would be, in concurrent with that regulation. I know they're not necessarily medical practitioners.
Yeah, I think that's specific for medical practitioners.
Because it does
Okay.
specify the information that we need to maintain records of below, I believe. Yeah.
Thank you. On page 20, under enforcements, section 13, part B, 2 comments. One is there needs to be a comma between drugs and physical. And my second comment is actually to remove the section about physical disability. Putting my ADA coordinator hat on, I see that as discriminatory towards persons with disabilities.
Can you kindly repeat the section?
Page 20,
Yep.
section 13 on enforcement,
Mm-hmm.
part B.
Yep.
Where it says drugs. Number 5, sorry, clarifying. Number 5, it says practicing body art while the ability to practice is impaired by alcohol, drugs, there would need to be a comma after
Yep.
drugs, physical disability or mental instability. I think that we should pull physical disability as it's discriminatory towards persons with disabilities.
Oh, man, I saw that before. There's a reason that had to stay in there, and I don't remember what it was off the top of my head. I'm sorry.
Is the word impaired by important in explaining the physical disability in that disability in that
I'll
sentence?
have to get back to you on that. I understand what you're saying, and I'm 100% on that, but I think there was a reason we had to put something like that. So can I check on that and get back to you?
Thank you.
I think that was a lawyer thing.
This might be an issue of the Oxford comma, where it meant to say the ability to practice is impaired by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The ability in practice is impaired by alcohol. The ability in practice is impaired by drugs. Maybe that's,
It may have been a grammatical,
it might have just been the way that they did it.
but
So
it certainly wasn't designed to be discriminatory.
I guess the question is, if it says the ability to practice is impaired by physical disability, does that meet the standard, or is that still a problem as far as disability is
I think it
concerned?
might still be a problem. Either way, we can add that to the list of changes, and I can ask the lawyers to explain that. Unless that literally means you can't tattoo if you have a cast on your right hand and you're right-handed, because that's like a physical impairment for you to do the thing that you're supposed to do. And I think that's where it comes from, but I don't want to say that with any certainty without having.
Maybe it's just a matter of editing the word disability to a more friendly word, even though it's
Physical
referring to
impairment.
something that may not warrant what it may sound like.
Or, I think with medical licensing, the way it works, based on my knowledge, is that when you are licensed as a medical practitioner, it is your responsibility as part of being licensed that if you have like a physical impairment, you're supposed to self-regulate. So it's not up to like a medical board that licensed you to say, hey, he broke his leg, he's not allowed to do surgery. When you get licensed, you're given that responsibility to say, if I have a physical disability that impairs me from tattooing or operating, I self-regulate not to do that. So I wonder if that kind of instruction could be included in like the licensing responsibilities. Or if, I mean, it's a way to kind of solve it while keeping it. I'll table that.
I would be hesitant to comment on something like that without hearing what town council has to say, I guess.
Yeah,
I
I
think town
don't
council
remember.
could
I'm sorry, I don't
consider
remember
that.
off the top of my head.
Yeah, I think I'd like town council to maybe consider that as a way to still inform about the standard without us overstepping and regulating into people's private lives.
Marty, just while we're looking at this as an overview real quick, can I just, because while we're on this page, In the enforcement section, we have the health department may deny or refuse any body art establishment, and that the health department may suspend or revoke.
That should be the board.
Yeah, because then it's followed by, you know, agents of the Board of Health may enforce it, but if the health department is doing X, Y, and Z.
That should be the board.
Okay. The Board of Health may enforce these really good, so it's just that consistency would be preferred. Sorry if I jumped on top of you, Melissa.
All set, thank you.
Is there any other discussion or comments on the body art regulations? Seeing none, Marty, if you can send those for review, we can have that copy available. We can, again, bring this up at our next meeting and go from here and discussing some more of these suggested edits and changes. Okay. On to our new business section, and our final agenda item is to review the fee schedule. So everybody should have a copy of the fee schedule for the town of Abington that was effective July 1st, 2014, and a spreadsheet comparing our fee schedule to surrounding towns. So clearly this hasn't been updated in, what's that, 6 years? So, seven. Yeah, it's 2021. This would be a good opportunity just to look at what we have. I know in the past, the board has done a public hearing if we decide to change fees on that. I would feel more comfortable if we did something of that nature, depending upon what the board wants to do. I mean, if we sit here tonight and decide that we don't want to change anything, then I guess it's a moot point, but I want to throw that option up. Marty, do you have anything you want to comment on this?
I don't. It's just one of those things that needs to be updated, and the board should, we try to provide as much info on the surrounding communities as possible. And we're not necessarily recommending any specific fee schedule changes. It's just one of those things that this has been a long time since it's even been looked at, and we want to make sure that we are at least, I don't want to say competitive, concurrent. We're in the same ballpark as our neighboring communities, so we're not over or undercharging a lot based on other people, at least to stay, just at that industry standard. If you're happy with it, then it can just stay as is. If you want to make any changes, then that is up to you. It was just one of those things that it hasn't been updated for 7 years. And to Aaron's point, when we started this, let's look at these regulations. That was one of those things that just stuck in my head as needing, and so I asked him.
Sorry, if I may, just with one thing before we move on to discussion. The updated 3/17/2015 versus the one that was effective July 1st. So this is just the updated from that, so it's 6 years.
Yeah, but it was only, I think there was only
just
one
fee.
change.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Time for discussion.
Yeah, absolutely.
As I understand it. I wasn't here for that, so I can't really.
Some of these, I kind of wonder are if in the Board of Health's scope. For example, perk test.
Yes, they are. We do Title V inspections and Title V system installations in town.
Is a perk test is like how much
The percolation
water
test is how much.
soil has in it, right? Like
Yeah.
marshland or?
Nope. A percolation test is how fast the water will go down in a certain type of soil to make it suitable for septic installation.
Okay, so,
I think Andrew's one of those experts on that too.
I was gonna say I could offer something for that, because we do that at work.
Yeah.
But
go ahead.
he's exactly right. It just measures how quickly and how much water will soak through different types of soil.
And that soak rate is how much the microbes will get, or the poo, basically, will get caught in that soil so that it can be absorbed by the anaerobic bacteria in the soil.
So perk test as related to like septic tank purposes, not for like getting a building permit to build a shed?
Only septic.
Okay.
Title V specific, yeah.
Same question for housing, second reinspection, third and,
So we are responsible for the habitability 410 CMR.
Okay.
If we have to continually go out to inspect a specific type of complaint, that is one of the enforcement tools that we can use to help us with compliance.
does us doing the housing kind of cross with the Housing Authority of Abington?
Well, the Housing Authority is specific to the two, to
Buildings
Lincoln
over there?
and to Shaw.
Okay.
The trash section of the fee schedule is not related to our contract with
Which one?
Boston Carting, correct?
Well, for
That's-
which item?
The trash, commercial hauler and dumpster.
No, that is, because
That
people,
is.
anybody, so in addition to Boston Carting, we have, Troop has dumpsters around, South Shore Disposal has dumpsters around, they have to pay for that, and they have to pay to be a hauler in town to move stuff around. So that's the fee for that.
So this is the fee for a separate hauler?
Yes.
Okay.
For example, Troop, they send in, they're really good about, like, you know, most of the companies are pretty good about that. There's quite a few of them, there's a lot of them. And that also includes, no, that's just specific for trash, but there's also a septic haulers for people driving that type of material around.
Still open for questions?
Sorry?
Temporary food permits, does this apply that if you have like sarcastic swine, for example? I'm aware that they've done like on-site things for food.
If they have a catering license, they don't
Right.
need a temporary food permit.
Okay, I get it, so
Yeah.
it's like one or the other. Thank you.
Temporary food permits specific to pop-ups,
Yeah.
right, or food trucks.
Gotcha, so I see there's a
I'm
catering
a
annual.
California guy, so
Mhm.
I'm all about that food truck lifestyle.
And then Marty, when's the last time you had a 10-day emergency beaver removal?
Not since I've been here.
Will you bring me along the next time that happens?
100%.
Part of my Board of Health duties, sir.
I saw a beaver on my house.
A lot of towns have that one, and they have bats too, like bat problems. They will ask the residents if they capture a bat, we will ask them to hold it so we can test it. I've never had to do a beaver, knock on wood, that's apropos. But I have had to do bats way back in the day.
I appreciate your sense of humor about these things.
Thank you.
Unless there are any other questions, I'm willing to entertain action.
Just given the information in front of us, thank you for giving us the information of the other towns, surrounding towns. I don't see anything that's outstandingly, just stands out as something to make a motion on. Are there, you did say you don't have any recommendations, but I just want to ask one more time. Is there something that you wanted us to take a look at that to be raised?
Nothing jumped out at us as being a real, I'm still looking at Chris because we've been working on this one together.
Right.
Nothing was Apprentice body art was one of the,
Yeah, the only thing missing on here is the guest practitioner, which wasn't, should have been on here to begin with, but wasn't, so.
and it will be in the new regulation, so we can add it to the new fee schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Tonight, after tonight, if you would like us to put that on there.
Okay. Thank
I
you.
can imagine some of these are almost zero, like, you know, there's like hardly any revenue, and obviously it's the restaurants that probably drive the most.
Mostly, I would say it's the permitting, not just the restaurants, the dumpster haulers, our septic haulers, all of those are the bigger ticket item.
Okay.
The rest of them are used for enforcement and/or code violation.
The housing, the reoccupancy without final reinspection, that's not like building codes, that's
No,
just
that's-
with public funded housing, correct?
No, that's with any housing, if there's a specific necessity dictated by the 410, which is the habitability. It's just like the one that says, you know, you will have X number of degrees of heat during the day, that one. That one's kind of confusing because it's very situationally specific. And since I've been here, it hasn't happened. But
Okay,
it's
but-
one of those things that's always on there, and in the event that we have to do it.
These other housing ones, that would apply to anybody getting a building permit to put an addition on their house, say?
No, those
Not-
are
that's
specific to code violations or to complaints of code violations that we need to have enforced for correction.
Okay.
Okay, I do have some legitimate fee questions. All of them are kind of related to the same idea of if you have a citizen who is having this situation and their fees to get back on the right track, this could make that pathway harder. So the first one is septic repair. And this is what I'm thinking, your septic tank fails, you've got to replace it, and then on top of that, you've got to pay $100 for a repair permit. So that to me seems a little, like my heart goes out to the homeowner. I see that each revision is $50 is there justification for that $100? People don't fail their septic tanks on purpose, you know?
So that is if we have to go out and be a party to the repair and/or a party to the plan design. Typically, we don't have to do that because they will have an engineer,
Yes.
but we have to be on site for the inspections, we have to be on site for the repairs. We have to be, if there's a need, and it's obviously not like an emergent, like, you know, turn it
Right.
off, right? That's, so it's specific for
You
the
have to go
use
out
of
there
our
and do work.
time to go out there.
This is, if you can't answer this question, I understand, because it might be every case is different, but how many hours from a Department of Health member to something like that?
It's situationally dependent.
Okay.
If we have it could be as simple as something like, I smell sewage. Then we have to go
Yes.
out there and we spend 3 hours trying to locate it, and turns out their neighbor's septic failed. That's very situationally dependent.
Gotcha, and I do understand, it's not just the 3 hours that you're out there, it's the 3 hours that you're also not doing your other duties, so.
And sometimes it's not at, you know, the 8 to 4.
For the septic reinspection fees, it's kind of the same idea. You know, if we do a repair, it's $100. For reinspection, $75. If you come out a third time, this is one of those things where I don't want to kick a homeowner when they're down. So the fact that we're increasing our fees each time we go out, is it because of the extra time it takes on a third inspection, or is it supposed to try to encourage them to get back on the right path?
A little bit of both. If it's a continually failed system based on not following guidance or not following engineer protocol or our advice, then, and we have to keep going out there, we have to keep charging them for it.
Okay. Same.
If it was oh, we missed that last time,
Yes,
then there's no way I would charge someone for a reinspection fee.
that makes sense. Housing inspection for Group 8 and Section 8. Is this the tenants that would pay this type of situation for Section 8? Or is this like the building manager?
Typically, it's the housing, whatever, so it would be, whatever apartment complex is paying, would normally pay for that.
So the facility that's renting to
Not
Section 8?
the tenant.
Not the tenant, okay, that's exactly what I was asking.
And that doesn't happen, no, it happens with some regularity, actually.
And then asbestos removal permit. Asbestos removal is something I'd love to encourage. So I just kind of wonder about the permit, because I think, I'm not sure, but I think you hire like someone who's licensed to do the removal.
Depending upon the grade, where it's at, and I would really, like just let the subject matter experts on the asbestos do that,
Yeah.
because it's not really my forte. I think that's a lot, there's dependent upon what type of asbestos, where it's at, whether it's friable, non-friable, that kind of thing.
If you're a homeowner or a property owner and you've got asbestos, you're probably going to have to hire a licensed professional to do the removal in order.
Correct. And you will go through the building department to that, but they know that they also have to get a asbestos removal from the health department, because it is supposed to be
Track.
transported, disposed of in specific ways.
Does
And
our-
that's as I understand it. Again, I'm not really an expert in asbestos.
Does our permit fees kind of go towards that? My thought process, when you hire a professional to do this, they take care of that.
The asbestos professional is paying that fee, not the homeowner.
So the asbestos professional, before they remove asbestos in Abington, they pay this permit fee?
100%.
Okay, and then they can, all right.
Yeah.
This is where I'm,
Usually same with the septic repairs and installers and inspectors. It's normally not the homeowner who will pay for the inspection. It's part of the services. Although sometimes it is the homeowner. Actually, that's kind of situationally dependent. I would probably
thank you, I know I'm
yield
running
to
out.
Andrew for that
98%
one
seal,
too.
right?
What's that?
We're about 98.
There's like 5 or 6 houses.
Okay.
And there's specific reasons why they're not on sewer.
Right. Elevation.
Setback, elevation,
Elevation's right.
location to, or proximity.
Right.
So Aaron, based on that, I just want to vocalize, I don't feel comfortable voting for this en masse. I do have the one that strikes me is the third and subsequent reinspection, having an increased fee, because
For which one?
the septic reinspection, the second reinspection fee, if given the opportunity, I would like that to see for second and subsequent. Like, if you have to go out 3-4 times, I get getting reimbursed for time, but we want people to repair their systems, and charging them an extra $25 when they're probably, here's where my compassion goes. If you haven't fixed your septic system, it's probably because you're short of money. I'd like to give that benefit of the doubt to homeowners.
It can be an enforcement tool too if they're not complying.
Right. Well, I do like the idea of subsequent reinspection, so you can apply the fee over and over, but the fee increasing, you know, as a punitive measure, I personally lean on the side of the homeowners. But outside of that, Aaron, that's the only one I know other people on the board have to say here that I have any concern about.
If you are finished. Each revision, hypothetical here, I'm going to put in a new septic system and I hit ledge. And I have to redesign the septic tank around this big piece of rock. That's considered a revision?
Only if you need our assistance in doing so. Typically, the engineers, when they're doing the design of the system, can hit that, redesign, and resubmit, and they won't need our input on the system design.
Okay.
Because I'm not a design expert, so I don't really, if they need assistance with the plans as a homeowner, you know what I mean? So it's like one of those.
My whole thing was, you never know what's in the ground underneath you, and it's not the homeowner's fault, because at the end of the day, the contractor's gonna pass that fee on to the homeowner doing the work.
Yeah, and I would say the same with the well, too. They should be able to find water before they pay for the, like you have to drill, and you can come up, you can hit a ledge, and you can't bust through. That's not fair to the homeowner either. But that's something that I can do because we're not breaking any rules by saying, okay, well, you have to do this because it was through no fault of your own.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'm to myself, not to the whole board.
My other one was House of Worship. I personally think we should talk about getting rid of that. I mean, in the age of COVID that we live in, all houses of worship were shut down for a while. And
Which fee?
it's on the breakdown of the towns.
Is it House of Worship Kitchen? Is that the one you're referring to? So we have it on the comparative one under food establishment, so the kitchen in a house of worship. Is that this particular one?
I'm just seeing bed and breakfast, house of worship, residential kitchen.
You're talking about the other kitchens on the first page?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. Yeah, so the other kitchens under bakery, bed and breakfast, house of worship.
Okay. And then,
You want to get rid of that one?
I thought it was like a church. House of worship was a church, not.
It is, but that's completely up to you guys.
Is this specifying the inspection fee for a house of worship's kitchen? That's what this is doing?
Yes.
Okay. So a church or a house of worship or what have you would pay $100 for you to come in?
If they have
Yeah.
a kitchen on site and they serve something.
Okay. And that covers the labor hours to go out there and do the inspection?
Right.
Okay.
And that's already reduced from what we would charge a food establishment of the lowest seating, which is $175. So while it is a house of worship, it is a substantial decrease in the fee, for the record.
Chris, is the not applicables here because you couldn't find them or because they don't have them?
Thank you, I was just going
Yeah.
to say that, that does not mean that those towns are not charging it, it means that it wasn't listed on their website. I'm sure if you called some of those health departments, they probably do charge the fee, but it wasn't listed on their website.
I'd like to think in the house of worship scenario, I don't think we're unique in having that fee. That's my feeling on that, but I understand the sentiment on removing it. So I would be willing to entertain action if we have any on this. We do have a full agenda for our next meeting, and not that I don't want to act on stuff when we can, but if this is something that we want to make changes to, and we may need to open up to a public hearing, I may want to suggest that we table this for the next, till 2 meetings from now, so that we can get through the other 2 large regulations we plan to get to, and then focus on this separately. if that is
I think that's
the action the board would
appropriate
like
to
to take.
Marty, you said this needs to be done. Was there a timeline, sir, for updates according to our?
No, ma'am,
Okay.
this is just one of those things that I think needs to be done.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, and I think this falls under the scope of a lot of the review and I know my intention with bringing it to the table is looking at regulations and seeing what needed the most work and then going back and tackling them. We've already decided that we're going to go and tackle body art and tobacco. So if we can, maybe finish one thing and get to the next thing and make sure that we give it the right amount of time and not overwhelm residents with one long meeting of too much information. I think that would be more appropriate just in terms of letting the public participate.
Chair, if I may.
The chair recognizes Chris Schultz.
Just to note on the fee, so currently, at least for permit renewals, 2022 is due at the end of the month. So if you were making any changes on these permits, that wouldn't be going into effect until 2023, so you got a little bit of time.
Thank you. So unless we want to take any other action, I would default to tabling that. I'm just curious what the board would like to do.
I'd move to table it.
I have a motion from Kevin to table it,
I'll second it.
second from Andrew. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed?
It is a majority. We will table this until the meeting following our next meeting, so that'll be our first meeting in January. All right. With all our agenda items having been completed, I would now entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn from Melissa.
Second?
Second from Andrew. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It's unanimous. We are adjourned.